Lloyd's of London is a network with connected to provision of insurance, including very important provocative high level insurance. As a matter of fact, Lloyd's of London is one of the largest providers of insurance for the maritime sector. Last year, there was a policy whereby maritime vessels were required to be in compliance with policies regarding emissions of a particular contaminant. There's multiple stages where sulfur dioxide, I believe, was going to be reduced, that the permissible emissions for SOx, as they called it, were supposed to be reduced by a very, very substantial amount. By the first of the year of last year, they were supposed to be in effect, and then there was a very short period of time after that, less than 60 days, where vessels that had been identified needed to be demonstrating their compliance. The reductions in the permissible emissions were extremely substantial. And while this had been something that had been online for, or had been lined up for a considerable amount of time, I was concerned as early as late August, early September 2019 that when this went into effect, it was going to have a very, very substantial impact. That it's almost like what happens when your body is very, has a lot of toxins in it, and then you just immediately cut them off. It's almost like a shock. And that shock that sets in at the onset of the lack of the capacity to be exposed to what you've been normalized to can create a kind of shock. This is actually part of the justifications that are used in some ways of treating medical maladies, or treating, for instance, drug abuse or drug addiction as a medical condition, that try to make justification for things such as a harm reduction policy or a policy of substituting one addictive for another, or trying to create some sort of substitution in the course of trying to get somebody to address or over their addiction problem. Is the shock it causes the body can be so substantial. My concern is when I first started reading about this, something similar was going to happen globally. That either the cost involved with uh, fitting all of these vessels to be able to deal with that, or actually something magnetic, almost like a biological resonance of the planet in consideration of this, coordinated with the manners in which the specific kinds of laws related to, or in some cases, lack thereof, of the maritime sector would provide people who had access to maritime transport or maritime matters as a offset possibility for other investment schemes. That it would be concurrent with some sort of condition that would be going on, and that it could actually provide international security problems. That it was potentially going to be used concurrent to destabilization in other areas, if it were not to be coordinated with a conscious effort to cracking down on and prosecuting crime, including organized crime. That if I was correct, and the kind of potential disturbance it would create, not just to the markets, but to the sort of magnetosphere of human experience, including human consciousness, that it was going to need something concurrent that was actually detoxifying, or was reducing the pollutants, the social pollutants, to prevent against some offset and some efforts to try to do very, very dirty things in connection, either literally or figuratively, matters related to maritime travel and transport, and how that could be used as a smokescreen or cover up for other kinds of crime, including very, very, very substantial crime. Now, it was beginning in 2019. There were a number of incidents that involved maritime vessels that either had an accident or specifically for a period of time ended up being put in the press as having been hijacked. And all of these matters would call into question considerations of the insurance that would be provided to those specific vessels, but also what it would do to rates or what it would do to schemes within the sector overall. I can't say I have a great deal of, I have a very, very, very limited understanding of how maritime insurance works. But throughout the end of 2019, things were happening, and throughout 2020, I have been tracking what are very alarming, irresponsible policy implementation and actions by the Customs and Border Patrol of the United States, including through its customs broker examination practices. We are now in the stage of the third consecutive customs broker examination period. It includes the time frame during which people sign up that have been riddled with, or have been completely inappropriate things that have been going on, both with the signing up process, with the information presented about the exams, and with what, in this case, this particular customs broker exam seems to be a double booking in terms of who signed up to take it. The middle of December, there was a specific time frame and an alert on the customs broker examination site. It said there was going to be an initial temporary period to sign up to take the exam in 2021. Well, now the information on the customs broker exam site, the last time I checked, I have not checked yet today, I'm not going to check right now. The last time I checked, about 2 weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, information said that it had started, the signing up period started later after the beginning of 2021. It was going to be going to around this time frame now to sign up for the exam. So what happened to that first stage of that first call out for people to sign up for the customs broker examination that is supposed to be taking place this year? There's 2 examinations per year. The first one's supposed to be coming up relatively soon. This was after I had made public as much as I could, in lieu of having any responsible authority to report to, and in lieu of having any authentication or verification that any of my reporting efforts in the last 4 years have been addressed in and taken in good faith. In lieu of that, I presented information publicly via the means I had access to last August in consideration of egregious crimes crimes, by the way, that were going on concurrent to the customs broker exam in August, and that was following what had happened in March and April of 2020 concerning the customs broker exam, which, among other things, had said a week before the customs broker exam that was supposed to happen in April of last year, the information concerning what had happened with the previous year's customs broker exam in October was that people who were challenging the results were still waiting. It had been several months. So if you had taken the exam and there had been some discrepancy, or you thought that there had been some problem and you needed to appeal, or you needed to double check the results of the exam because for any number of reasons, they said you could potentially not have passed the test and you were disputing it, or maybe you identified something on the test that was inaccurate. And because of the way it was structured in the test, you did not feel safe or did not feel it was appropriate to answer the question in that particular way. I know personally, I have taken several tests, including tests alleged to be for licensing, and including tests alleged to be around matters connected to very high level safety. And the modalities of the test are problematic. It is as if they are attempting to elicit a confirmation that you will cooperate with doing something that you know is illegal or you know is inaccurate for the specific matter at hand, as a way to keep quiet about what is going to be presented later that you know is either illegal or violating policy. Now, I've reported this since the beginning of 2018 when I've encountered it. And even if there's a chance to go and retest without anybody following up on that report, they do the same thing again. And what I've noticed is that the next time they do it, they increase the risk. They increase the risk and they increase the brutality and the punishment visited upon you. If you didn't get the lesson that no one's going to respond when you have a problem with them attempting to try to infer that you would do something illegal, and if you say something, well, what are you going to do? Take the test again? Because just so you know, this would be the third time I've been monitoring this kind of practice just with the customs broker examination in the United States of America. I give this as an example because in August of last year, something was happening when it came to information about policies for nuclear power plants. There aren't a lot of places on the planet that are qualified to provide facilities insurance for nuclear power plants. The major one that I had found that was, while, by the way, I was investigating matters related to maritime safety, including insurance for maritime vessels or maritime insurance, something happened. It had been split in half. There were major benchmark dates concerning public notices related to the sector associated with insuring nuclear power plants. The day I found them, it was the anniversary of half or later. It was as if it had been cut in half. That somebody COVIDed, they cleaved in half the insurance related to safety concerning nuclear power plants. The day before, a number of the benchmarks concerning public notice or information about policy updates on that particular organization's nuclear power plant safety or nuclear power plant insurance come due. All the links were broken. All of the links were broken. The links were broken. You couldn't get any information. And if you could, it was hacked. It looked like it had been hacked. There's something wrong with it. But the ones that were for that day or for later were okay. What I understand is that there was a major benchmark in somewhere, in some manner, related to the solvency of the insurance sector specific to nuclear facilities, and someone let it lapse and didn't tell anybody. So half of that information at that point in time was not available. There was a compromise to the system related to insurance for nuclear power facilities that was in default. And so, what do you do with the rest of that half of an insurance policy? You have half of the insurance you need for a nuclear facility. If I'm not mistaken, I found that exactly 6 months ago. Now, I got it in my evidence. I'm not going to look through my evidence right now. This was 100% premeditated and planned. I had need to contact the authorities, the Insurance Regulator Authority in the United Kingdom in 2018 concerning fraud, including fraud that I understood was connected to unconstitutional changes to law in the state of Texas around purported bans related to people's decisions around political support for nations that I now understand are attempting to engage with people in the state of Texas in manners that would compel them to undermine the Constitution of the federal government without supporting a public direct effort to, if necessary, secede and or allow a process to alter the constitutional government in Texas to be a independent republic or an independent country, as opposed to engaging in a preferencing of specific sex around ritual performance that is in violation of many numerous other articles of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. But the point of the matter is, this is premeditated. This is premeditated. It's been premeditated for a long time. Who thought it was appropriate to leverage an intentional act of default on insurance connected to nuclear facilities so that now we have what? Now that is how this is going, isn't it? This is actually a nuclear attack of a particular kind, and nobody wants to acknowledge it as such. Is this a nuclear attack that was co conspired with as part of ongoing inside jobs by members of the government whose loyalty is to aiding and abetting their criminal co conspirators in various companies or corporate entities and trying to default so that they can then defraud the government to cover up for their crime? I mean, they're talking about a lot of distress because people were without their power and people were without their water, and it's below freezing. We're not just talking about a warming center for the homeless like we were in 2018. Please remember, in 2018, in Houston and Harris County, there was a very, very severe cold spell. Did it have this kind of snow? No, it did not. But it was very, very cold. Pipes ended up breaking. Water got turned off in some areas because it froze. They had to open up, or as they said, they called them warming centers, where homeless people were allowed for a temporary amount of time to be put into places where presumably they could keep warm from what was going on so they wouldn't freeze to death. This lasted for several days, nearly a week, nearly 4 to 5 days, if I am correct. These warming centers were open. This is not something that is not known. There are emergency response. There are already in place specific kinds of emergency response to a weather event, even like this. This is something different. If there were to be made an argument, or if there were to be made a claim that what's going on is a nuclear terrorist attack, I would agree. And not only would I agree, I believe it was absolutely 100% premeditated. In less than 2 months is the 25th anniversary of a piece of legislation that was one of the primary pieces of legislation for altering policy the United States had when it came to identification and designation of a terrorist organization. It just so happens that bill's author is Joseph Biden. And it just so happens that the preceding bill to that one was authored by Charles Schumer. If you look at those two bills and you compare and contrast benchmark dates as well as various aspects of the processes that were specific and particular to those bills, and you evaluate them relative to what's going on now, you have a very, very compelling case for understanding this has been actually pre-coordinated and premeditated for over 25 years. As a matter of fact, even before September 11th, which then I believe would allow for an argument that the September 11th terrorist attack was itself an inside job, and that what Texas is dealing with right now is the payback, the blowback from its role in the September 11th terrorist attack, and how other people, rather than prosecuting those as the kind of crimes they were, decided they were going to aid and abet a criminal conspiracy to try to use it as a process of outlays specific to the insurance sector to cover up for crime using acts of insurance and other financial fraud. Now we are where we are. I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to be cruel to anybody that's actually going through some sort of stress, or that is experiencing some process right now without their electricity or without their water. But even as severe as this is, in many ways, processes had already been put in place and tested, especially again on the homeless. But these misrepresentations of what is supposed to be the regulatory authority of concern, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, have been persisting for several years. If I'm correct, this is not the end. This is part of a multi-phase process. So, how it is responded to now is going to set the tone for what we have to work with moving forward. And this consistent process of undermining our capacity to address it as crime and instead be put into a situation where our energy is supposed to be focused on trying to compel a payoff from people in government for matters that are actually intentionally mischaracterized for a reason. If we don't identify this as a terrorist attack and respond, then all of those people that spent the last 25 years of our lives trafficking us and trafficking scores of other people, including in completely racist paradigms that have accrued and that have impacted entire generations of people's consciousness, including consciousness of their political options, that would not be about ceding to organized crime, well, all of that ends up defaulting too. We can't cover it. All that insurance that was supposed to be set up in order to protect us in the event of a terrorist attack. Well, nobody's calling this terrorist. Nobody's calling this terrorism because they've already tried to use terrorism to cover up for crime.